Mr. Mayor, thank you for hosting me. Thank you all for being here. Let me just spend a few minutes. We're going to have a discussion about immigration and the role immigration is playing in the local economy here. But let me just tell you why I'm here. So I'm the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. The Federal Reserve is our nation's central bank. So the job of a central bank, we have a bunch of jobs, but the basic job is to try to manage the ups and downs of the economy. So if the economy looks like it's slowing down, the central bank will typically cut interest rates to try to boost it. If the economy looks like it's overheating, the central bank will typically raise rates to try to cool it down so it doesn't get too hot or too cold. Now, the US Congress created the Federal Reserve. In 1913, they passed a law that created the nation's central bank. But they did something unique. They said, we don't want the central bank just housed in Washington, D.C., concentrated there. They want it to be spread out all around the country. So what's unique about our central bank is that we have what's called the Board of Governors in Washington, D.C., but we have 12 independent regional Federal Reserve banks, including the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, and our jobs are to represent all of you. So I go back to Washington, D.C. 8 times a year where we set interest rates for the country. A big part of my job is to speak directly about what's happening in our regional economy and factor that into the national discussion of where monetary policy should be. So our region that is covered by the Minneapolis Fed is Minnesota, North and South Dakota, Montana, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and northwestern Wisconsin. That's a big region, and it's a diverse region. So I spend a lot of my time traveling around the region, meeting with small groups, just like this, open forums for anybody in the community can come, meeting with bankers, we met earlier today, meeting with small businesses, meeting with entrepreneurs to get a firsthand sense of what's happening in the local economy. Is the economy growing? Are businesses succeeding? Are they able to find workers? What's happening to wages? All of this stuff goes back into our analysis as we think about monetary policy for the nation. So 2 things I keep hearing over and over and over again as I travel around our region. Number one, a lot of businesses say they can't find workers to feed their, either for the farms or for the factories or in their businesses. So that's a common theme that I hear a lot. And second, a lot of our region is rural, and generally speaking, rural communities have been in a long gradual decline because young people, families have kids. The kids tend not to stick around. Most of them tend to leave. They go to the cities, they go away for college, maybe they don't come back. And so it's a common challenge that I hear just about everywhere I go. But there are a few communities that are turning the tide, and they're turning the tide on those trends through immigration. So the reason I came here today was I heard a lot about Worthington as very successfully bringing in immigrant families into their communities, welcoming them, assimilating them, and then that's a real source of economic growth for the local economy. So I'm here to learn. That's why we asked the mayor if we could do something together to learn firsthand how has Worthington gone about doing this? How have you had the success? What have been the challenges? What can we learn and potentially share with other communities across our region and across the country? Maybe they too could utilize this as an economic tool for them. So that's why I'm here, and very happy to hear the stories that the courageous folks shared with us earlier today and the play. But thanks for being here, and the more direct and the more candid you are with me, the more I'm going to learn from you. So I would really appreciate all your insights. So that's why we're here, so thank you. So Mr. Mayor, tell me about Worthington. Tell me about how did immigration become such a key to your success?
Well, it really started with the churches almost 40 years ago. They started to sponsor and invite refugees from Southeast Asia. And at the time we had Campbell Soup Plant here. I think it was Armour's then, and maybe Montfort, and went through a few ownership changes, but now it's JBS. But back then, we were a city of 10,000 people, which was 99% Caucasian. But today we've grown to 13,000, or a little over 13,000, but with almost a 50-50 split. So it's been great for our community. It's provided workers. I visited with a legislator last spring up in St. Paul from another district, and he said, I got a special spot in my heart for Worthington. He said, in my region, I have a city that's roughly the same size that turned down a pork processing plant because they didn't want to have the immigration, you know. And guess what? Now they're going backwards in population. They don't have the workers, and it's going to take them a long time to get to that point. You know, you just don't turn the light bulb on. You got people here. There's a lot of hard work with leaders and everything over the years, council members, you know, and putting policies together. So
That's helpful. And when did that process start? How long has it been going on?
Probably in earnest within the last 15 years, 10 to 15 years, you know, and I think it's, you know, from a city side, you have to have good leadership that buys into this. A city administrator, director of public service, you know, our law enforcement, they have to buy into it. You know, they do a Blue in the School program. I regularly see police officers stopping and playing basketball in our parks with, you know, a lot of different nationalities. So, and then you also have to, you know, I mean, the medical community, the two medical providers, you know, they have to have additional resources, you know, on staff to help. You know, so it's not just a turn the switch and, you know, it takes a lot of planning and it takes good people.
But it also takes, and that's on a turn to Len, it also takes, there need to be jobs available, right? A city with no jobs, flipping the switch, you can have all the good intentions, but what are people going to do? So what role has the business community played? And was this pusher, I mean, was it a pull from the business community or was it all at the same time?
I don't, you, as a business.
I've been with the company in the industry for about 3.5 years, so prior to that I'm not sure. Right now it's a pull. The workforce is hard to find, and we have found it's through word of mouth that we get our employees to move. So if they like the city, if they like the plant, they will tell people to come to move here. If there's things that they don't like, they'll say stay away.
Right.
So it's more of a pull. We don't have a lot of people knocking on our doors, a lot of applications coming in, so it's really going out and trying to seek people to come in.
And how many, do you have lots of openings? I mean, how many people would you like to hire?
On average, we hire about 15 a week.
15 a week?
Yeah, we have about 15 to 20 through orientation. We lose 10 to 12 to 15, depending upon.
So that just keeps it steady at 15 a week?
Keeps it steady. Right now, we've probably got about 30 openings.
Got it.
And I think you can go up and down the street with businesses. They all have help wanted signs out. You know, I think Prairie Holdings Group, they currently have maybe up to 30 openings. You know, they're a little bit higher level jobs, but they're, you know, the immigrants, we got a good MINSCU program school here, and that's working with the businesses, you know, to develop training programs, those types of things. So.
And Mayor, how long have you been in Worthington? Not necessarily as mayor, just you. How long have you been a
we
resident?
moved here in 1979.
Okay, so you've been here through this whole transition.
Oh.
So what could talk about some of the, I'm sure it's not all been easy. Talk about some of the challenges maybe early on. You know, were there cultural challenges or different frictions that came along that I think other communities might be nervous about and they could learn from your success?
There's been a lot of challenges. You know, with opportunities, there are going to be challenges. You know, I think, you know, as they come over, I think in the first generations, you know, they're not acclimated to our lifestyle. Remember, us Germans and Irish have been here since the 20s, you know, and moved on. So we're starting to get into the second generation where there's home ownership now. They're starting to take pride in their properties. You know, but we have up to 12 different cultures that are, it's a constant evolvement, you know, and so, but, you know, we've had our challenges, but we're moving forward.
Yeah.
but again, it's you got to have good people like the International Festival for 25 years of, you know, the support groups, Manus Unitas, the faith community in Worthington. You got to have all those in place, and they all got to be working towards it, because this started with the churches 40 years ago. So, you know, I don't know if I can put one thing on my finger, and maybe, you know, some of you can, but, you know, it's just, it takes working together. And we're lucky. We're very lucky to have the people we have in Worthington.
Yeah. If you look just at the basic economics of this, one primary source of economic growth for any country is simply population growth. You have more population growth, you have more workers to produce things, and you have more consumers to buy things. Now, as societies get wealthier, they tend to have fewer kids. So our fertility rate has gone down in America, and it's gone down in Europe, and it's gone down in Canada, and it's gone down in Japan. Well, if you just let that happen, that means your economic growth rate is going to go down too, because you simply have fewer workers and fewer kids, or fewer people to buy things. Now, if you do the math, there are three choices that we have as a society. One choice is just accept slower growth. A second choice is to subsidize fertility. And this is what Japan is trying to do, where you give tax credits and free childcare, other incentives to try to encourage families to have more kids. It's really expensive, and I joke, it takes 20 years to grow a new worker. Right? It takes a long time. Or number three, you can embrace immigration. And those are the three choices, and that's literally just the math. Now, the advantage that we have in the US is that while we're not perfect, we're better than just about any other country at embracing immigration and integrating them in our society. So my parents are immigrants from India. They came over, they were educated, they came to the US for opportunity, for higher education and for jobs. And then my sister and I were born here. And, you know, I think that we're evidence of the opportunities that are here for folks. And my wife is an immigrant. So I think that we're better at immigration than just about anybody else. And that's why Japan, as an example, is having to turn to try to subsidize fertility. Because culturally, they're so resistant to immigration, it runs countercultural for them. And so they're left with just trying this other method, which, you know, is almost like a fool's errand. So I do think immigration does have a hugely important role to play in US economic growth if we want the economy to grow. Personally, I'm in favor of economic growth. And so, but not everybody is.
Personally, I am too.
Glad to hear it.
But you know, it's not only providing workers for our businesses. Culturally, we're enriched. You know, you can go downtown here, and I talked to a couple from Spirit Lake, you know, just 2 weeks ago, said, oh, we drove up to Worthington to go out for some Mexican food, some good Mexican food, you know. So culturally, we're there, but also educationally. I say that our K-12 system, which I think is 70% the population, is immigrant. And so virtually over that 12 years or 13 years, when someone graduates from Worthington High School, just by virtue of their conversations in classrooms and things over the years, they're ready for the world, you know. And our goal is, one job is, we need to keep them here. You know, we need apprenticeships, we need programs through MnSCU, Minnesota West, you know, and we're lucky in our community. We got the people, you know.
So Lem, talk about it from the employer perspective. You said you're hiring 15 or 20 a week. You know, what's it like? What are the challenges? Or do you have the system down pretty well now?
I think a lot of the challenges is our industry is very fast-paced and hard work. So we process about 21,000 hogs a day with 2,200 people, about 58 different languages and dialects. So it's very complex, but it gets done. And the workers that we get are those immigrants or refugees that come over that want to make a better life for their family. And this is a great opportunity to start out in a meat packing job. It's very good pay. You're going to get some overtime. You can really get stable, and you can really start building your family out. So it's a really great opportunity. The next generations that come up are probably like the generations of our ancestors that came over, got a little bit easier. But they bring a lot more. They bring that bilingual. They're perfectly bilingual, perfectly understand what it's like, the culture of home, but also the city that they're growing up in. And that adds a whole new element into everything within the city. And they help each other. Very kind, very giving people. Most hardworking workforce I've ever had in any industry that I've been in. No complaining about the hard work. I'm in HR, and we always joke we spend most of our day dealing with the discipline. Maybe 5 or 6 people, but out of 2,200, that's pretty darn good. We'd be in trouble if we were dealing with 2,200 people with disciplinary problems. But we lose sight of how wonderful the other 99.9% of the people. They want to work hard, they want to get their pay, they want to live their lives and provide a better life for their families. And our plant provides that first step. This city is really geared for it, the schools, the banks, the services. They've established community connectors here that help people get connected to those services and schools and hospitals and everything here. Just so many things that have occurred naturally along the way that help everyone along the way.
So where do folks who work in your plant, the new immigrants, where do they live? Like another issue that whenever I travel in our region, affordable housing comes up virtually everywhere that I go. So I'm just curious, where do folks that work in your plant, the new immigrants, what are their housing opportunities? So
we have housing struggles here in Worthington, but about 75% of our workforce lives in Worthington or has a Worthington address. We have about 200, 250 that commute from Sioux Falls, 45 minutes away through vans. We have some that are in these smaller communities just outside where it's a little bit more reasonable pricing, smaller communities that they go in. But most of them are just right here in the town, 75%.
And that's where the city, we're trying to be concentrating on housing, affordable housing, working with some developers to put some 18-unit apartments. We got a deed grant, for $800 and some thousand. We're still trying to work through that, but the construction costs in Worthington are the same as what they are in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or the suburbs, but we can't charge the rents that they can up there. So there's a struggle with affordable housing, and I don't know, I think the legislature's tried to work for some tax credits or something, but that would be very helpful, It's just, the cost of construction sometimes is even higher because we don't have the developers that can take advantage of, because they'll put up 30 different 18-unit apartment buildings, and they buy everything in bulk,
right.
And so it's an issue that way. It was interesting you brought up the bilingual and the second generation. We have a pretty active bioscience community here. We have Merck, which has a facility on the south side of town. We have a German company that has Newport Labs. We have Prairie Holdings Group that's getting back into the bioscience arena. And we have Bedford Industries. But they deal worldwide, and so they need the bilingual, when their salespeople are on the phone or things like that. So that's another advantage that some of our other businesses can relate to.
And you mentioned vans going to Sioux Falls. Do you all provide them, or is that privately arranged?
No, so somebody will buy it, one of the workers will buy it, and then they'll rent out seats.
Oh, I see. Got it. Interesting. Well, why don't we open up to the audience and see what questions or comments or thoughts you all want to share? I can't imagine this is a shy group.
Mike's not very shy.
Give me a minute.
Yeah, Greg's not very shy.
Here comes the mic to you.
Thank you. Greg Remo, president of First State Bank Southwest here in town. I advocated today that Worthington is ahead of the curve when dealing with immigration. And we have learned here in Worthington that immigrants will allow our economy to grow. And that's really the message here. And these stories that we just heard tonight is just living proof of of the dedication that these people have to be successful. And like our great-great-grandparents who immigrated to this country with entrepreneur spirits, these people are coming to Worthington, Minnesota with those same entrepreneur spirits. They just don't always look the same as we do. We're of different ethnic backgrounds. But the bottom line is our economy thrives on allowing them to succeed. And so I'm extremely excited for the future of Worthington because of that. Our bank only grows because of the immigrant population that feels comfortable coming here.
So what,
That's
on that, as a banker, what challenges, I'm sure it's more customers is better for you,
right.
but I have to imagine that the diversity of some of the immigrant populations creates its own set of new challenges for you as a banker.
Right.
Maybe it's language barriers or other things. How have you overcome them in your own business?
In our bank, personally, we have interpreters, and we utilize them quite often. It's not uncommon in our bank to see a 12-year-old child come in with her parents and do all the interpreting for her parents to acquire a home. One of the first business loans I ever made to an immigrant, the 12-year-old child did the entire application process, did the entire closing with the parents. Those are challenges that are unique to our situation here, but over time, like Len was talking, all those challenges come together and they start helping each other. And in the last, I would be sincere and say, in the last 3 to 5 years, we've seen less challenges than we saw 10, 15 years ago because of that coming together. And so I'm a huge advocate for immigration, allowing illegal immigrants to come and be our future is what can, in the future, revitalize rural America.
Jerry Perkins. Can you hear all right?
Yep.
I'm almost retired farmer, mostly retired. Have lived in Latin America for 7 years, and it's been fun to come back to Worthington and see the diversity and what the town has done. But there's some elephants in the room, and one of them is in some of your 8 trips to Washington, if you could relay to us, to them, the suffering that goes on here with the people that are undocumented. That is, we need these people, as you've all been testifying, but it's not easy, and there's a lot of suffering and a lot of it breaks families up. And if you have any insight on that, it'd be nice to hear it.
Well, I don't have much insight on that, only because if you look at the roles that Congress has assigned to the Fed, it's really focused on economics. And other policy issues are taken up by Congress, taken up by the executive branch. And the deal is, they leave us alone to try to deal with interest rates in a non-political manner, and then we let them do their business on behalf of the American people in making some of these different decisions. So I understand the point that you're making, and I accept it, but it is something that's pretty far outside the scope of what the Federal Reserve can influence. All I can do is...
You'll go to Washington 8 times.
I do go to Washington 8 times a year, and actually probably more than that. And so what I'm doing is I'm simply saying, we're going to use our economic analysis to make an economic argument about the role that if we want the U.S. economy to grow, how can you get it to grow when you have a declining fertility rate, right? That's a big constraint that we're putting on ourselves. And so I'm just trying to lay out the math for folks and then leave the other arguments to elected officials who are representing, all of you directly. In the back?
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes. Neel, hi, Terry Galswick, President, Minnesota West. The Midwest, we're quite modest, and I want to talk a little bit about a differential I've observed here in Worthington in juxtaposition to other communities I've lived in, and it's the willingness of our community leaders, both formal and informal, to use their areas of influence to affect policy that enables those that choose to come to our community to strive. So we're willing to take on risk, we're willing to challenge policy, and we do so in the spirit of community. And we don't celebrate that. An example is JBS and what Lynn has brought relative to voices to the community, leveraging the internal talent at his organization and informing our community on what we can do to better position our community in response to their values and their beliefs. And it's those types of dialogues and that type of influence that allows us to take that next small baby step. So I want to bring that to our attention, that it is through both formal and informal leadership that we're able to have these conversations and listen and position ourselves to be responsive.
Pardon me?
You want to talk about voices of the community?
Sure. I think many of you in the room have probably even participated in this, but about 2 years ago, being on a lot of boards, I kept getting asked, how can we hear from your employees what they want in this community? So we established what we call the voice to the community, and we have about 7 or 8 internal leaders that are bilingual and have kind of a deep reach, and family members of different cultures and languages. So we bring them it's the third Tuesday of every month is when we usually do this, for a lunch, and we invite somebody from the community. The mayor's been there, Sanford's been there, a bunch of other places have been there, and they talk. They sit across from the table. We provide a light lunch. I facilitate it. I don't participate in the conversation because I don't want to try to guide what they're doing there. This is really about if you want to talk and ask questions to our employees that represent all of these different languages. We've been doing it 2 years. I got a list this long of folks that want to keep coming in and talking to them. But what's really good about this, it doesn't have to just be JBS that does this. The college, you have so many students that are bilingual. You could do this there as well. I mean, in the schools. So this is something that could be replicated to start asking those same questions. And like I said, the ones that are bilingual, the second generation that have grown up in Worthington, they understand both sides of it a little bit better. So they really have some great insight on what their families and friends believe, but they also understand what it's like in Worthington.
Yeah. I know when we went in there, we had like Public Works Director was there with us, the city administrator, our Chief of Police.
Give you a mic, I can't hear you talking.
Okay. When we were in there, we had the Public Works Director, which is in charge of our streets and cleaning and things like that. We had our Chief of Police was there, and City Administrator, and it was good to see the dialogue because there were some things that the immigrants just didn't understand about snow removal, and when to remove your car from the streets, Well, Public Works Director was, did a very good job in presenting. So it's challenges like that, and we're thankful that JBS puts these on because it gives us a chance to talk directly to them.
And the main job of those folks that are internal, that are kind of the cultural leaders, is to understand what that topic's going to be and go talk with their friends and families and get a perspective, not just bring their own into it, but then also what they learn in that meeting, that they take it back as well. It's hard to measure, does that happen or doesn't it happen, but that is the expectation.
Hi, I'm Elaine Watson, a Worthington citizen, and I haven't been in here for the whole thing, but what I have heard, I'm all for economic growth and economic growth among all of the people in our town. But when you say equal, that means everybody. I'm not an immigrant, and I have fought for entrepreneurship here in this town for over 30 years. And I have seen immigrants come in and not here 2 months and have a business. So that's the question that I have. What is it that me, myself, can do? I have been through all the chains, everything to go through, to try to start a business here, a barbecue place, that's all I want. some little. I ain't asking for CBS and Fox. You know, I want to be treated the same way the immigrants are treated, and I'm not an immigrant.
One thing that there's been a group of private investors that have recently formed what we call the WIN Group. It's Worthington Investment Network, and you know, they're helping a brew pub get started with some food. You know, they're rehabilitating a older place downtown, you know, and then leasing it back to them. So, I mean, that private investment group, we haven't had that. We've lacked that. And it works well with the banks, you know. They need some gap loans. This investment group can be there to help the banks. We've got WIDC that's helped a lady-owned poultry cleaning facility business, 20 employees. WIDC, our Regional Economic Development Commission, made a revolving loan fund for that to help them get started. It's 20 employees now. So those are things that we're further ahead on than a lot of communities.
Michael, can I respond to that?
You bet.
Tomorrow morning you come and see me, okay? I know you well. Joe?
After the festival.
There we go. No, actually, to support what Mike is saying, though, Diane is here from the Southwest Initiative Foundation, and they have a micro loan program specifically to help entrepreneurship amongst everybody. And I mean everybody. So this gal right here next to me, Diana, I'll introduce you to her in the morning. Okay? Thanks, Mike.
We had a tour today. I was SRDC, Southwest Regional Development Commission, had their annual meeting, and we have a revolving loan fund, and we had a tour of businesses here in town, and there was 3 minority businesses that we toured that had taken revolving loan funds and very successful and that. So, you know, you need that investment because these are very entrepreneurial people, you know, as the person with WEON US computer business. So,
Someone up here had a question?
Hi, thanks. Thanks for coming. Wow, what a great honor for the community. My name is Mike Wall. I'd echo a little bit Jerry Perkins' comment that status is just a big deal. It's hard to become an integral part of the community if status is in question, and as you well know, if it's continuously in question, even if initially it was legal and appropriate, as it fluctuates, it's hard for folks to commit and to know. But I think Worthington's got 2 great stories that often get missed, and that's this recruitment to the community from folks of tremendous talent that choose to come here because of the diversity, not in spite of it. And so they're saying they want to be in a diverse community, and we could ramble about a couple of those examples I think many people are familiar with, and they're terrific stories, and I think that's something that a broader reach can appeal to. And then the other one, and you can probably speak to specifically, is the motivation of an immigrant. And so I've talked with folks as you reach a certain level of status. We worry about our kids, right? They've maybe had some level of achievement and success, well, where maybe they aren't motivated to the level that we were when we were kids, perhaps, right? But I know I don't see that in my immigration friends. Their level of motivation is extreme, and I think that bodes well for Worthington and the community and the state.
So I hear this a lot. When I was running for governor of California, I traveled all around the state. And California, you know, you think about Hollywood, you think about Silicon Valley, it's huge ag. I mean, California is an ag state. And I met with an immigrant strawberry farmer who started out as a strawberry picker. And he worked his way up, and he bought the farm, meaning he saved enough money and he bought the farm and he owned the farm. And he said, my kids will never do this work. And it's not because he didn't want them to do the work, it's because there's no way they're going to do the work. It's really, really, really hard work. So I think that's a common refrain. The only thing I'll say is, and I don't think it's a bad thing, you know, I think it's a sign of success and families positioning their children to do better than they did. But I will say, every generation thinks the generation that follows them is lazy, okay? So every time people say, oh, millennials are useless, I say, I remember my parents said that my generation was useless, and I'm sure their parents said that their generation was useless. And so I don't subscribe into that. I think that people find their own motivations and then they end up working hard. But I do agree with the broader point that generally speaking, the immigrants who work hard to come here are very motivated and will work very hard, generally speaking, when they get here.
You know, and along those lines, with you bringing that up, the hard work and the motivation is something else that I learned before I interviewed for JBS. I did research on this community, and I came across an article that the chief of police back then had written, and it was in the newspaper, maybe 5-6 years ago. There was a statistic out there that there's 11 cities about the same size as Worthington in Minnesota, and of those 11 cities, Worthington had the second lowest crime rate. Now, there was a lot of perception that it was a lot of crime rate, but it's the second lowest. And when we talk to a lot of our employees, they say that's why they're here. It's a safe place to raise their kids because they've come from pretty horrible places, from war-torn countries to refugee camps, which aren't a lot of fun, to even a big city in the U.S. when they land here. And so a lot of them really like the safety that's within this community. And I think we work them so hard out there, they don't have time to get in trouble.
So where do folks, let's say a new immigrant family arrives in Worthington, no job, don't know anybody, where do they go?
Angie,
What's Angie?
she's my recruiting manager.
No, but I mean, I'm just curious. Like to your point, this gentleman was dropped off at the gas station and met somebody as he was walking who pointed him, gave him some pointers. I'm just curious, are there programs now set up that are ready to go to help onboard people into the community?
Mm-hmm.
Len, actually, you should talk just.
Here, hold on, the mic's coming right to you.
The answer is yes to that, definitely. In fact, there's multiple programs that connect people with, and Len alluded to that in his conversation earlier about community connectors in this community plays a huge role in connecting new people to the community with services and sources of pure livelihood. The other thing that Jim talked about was the connection of the churches. Mm-hmm. And we have a program here in town called Love Inc. And Love Inc. is a collaboration of 13, 14 churches who accept helping people in the most need. And they're also pointing directions and helping those people connect.
Thanks.
I was gonna
Here comes the mic.
My husband and I are not from Worthington. We just happen to be traveling by on a way to a family reunion of my German immigrant ancestors up by Elbow Lake. And we saw a flyer for this program and thought we'd stop by. It's been very, 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 very interesting. One thing I would like someone to comment on, and perhaps the mayor might be the best, was the attitude, well, not necessarily the attitude, but the role, how law enforcement is supportive of the immigration. If that many immigrants are coming here, I'm assuming they feel it's a welcoming environment on the part of law enforcement, and if there was a big fear of ICE or something, maybe that wouldn't happen.
Well, as far as our local law enforcement, we've got great leadership. Now, there's been a challenge or two here and there, but I'm proud of what they're doing. They're trying to connect with all of the immigrants in the community. I've witnessed them at multiple events put on by Manus Unitas, and where they come in and they put on seminars on how do you handle a traffic stop. A lot of these immigrants don't know, what's a traffic stop look like, and so they put on seminars like that. There's the Blue in the School program where they're constantly in front of the kids and things like that. But it's critical that they build the trust with that community, because if you don't, you're not gonna root out the criminals. We want the criminals out of here. We want the criminals out of Worthington. you know. And so they work hard to develop that trust, you know, and so you have to have good leadership. And like I say, there's been an issue here or there, you know, but, you know, we need to look at the total picture, you know. So I would say that.
I have a question. Do they go, law enforcement go to any training to learn about, to learn about different immigrants here? Yeah, the question is about if the law enforcement here in Worthington, they learn about also different immigrants from different parts of the world. They have to learn.
They put a lot of money into training programs in that area, human resources, you know, those types of things. It's critical. They have to. You know, we have a program where there's a bonus for bilingual, being able to communicate in their languages. So, you know, it's something that we're working on, and we have to, you know, because the law enforcement community here in Worthington could not survive without trying to gain the trust of these people.
Excuse me.
Hi. No, go ahead. She's got the
I'm
mic.
right here. From an immigrant's perspective, as far as the police, no, we do not feel safe 100% of the time. It's great to say that when you're Caucasian, but if you really want to hear the perspective and voices of immigrants, have them on the table and you will hear their voices in regards to the police.
You know, I'd like to add a little bit. You know, the company that we have is very, very diverse, and it's taken a long time to evolve out there. But we've slowly gotten to a point where our leadership is becoming more reflective of the diversity that works there, and because of that, within our HR, within our trainers, within our frontline leadership, it becomes more comfortable when an employee sees somebody that's like them, that's in that leadership position. That builds them more trust. That's going to be a longer term in the greater community. So eventually, I foresee our police force over the years becoming more reflective, you know, and I think we got to have recruitment for that. You know, all of those things, city hall, everything, we got to slowly evolve to that, because that then says we're inclusive. I have better trust because someone like me is on that. You know, we have a voice at the table.
So I know that we have a mic here. Let's get your question. Then I want to go back to the lady in the back after you go.
Well, I wanted to concur with what she said, and I like what you just said, although I would like to, Len, but I would like to see that be a rapid change in Worthington. Like, I think you can see in sort of all of the different professional arenas in Worthington that immigrants are wildly underrepresented relative to their population, and there's been plenty of time for Worthington to start catching up on that front. And I think white people in professional positions should do a lot of like introspection and thought about ways in which they could actively diversify their professional fields. Like, because you see it with teachers, you see it in the police department, you see it in a lot of really important areas around town that are providing crucial services to people. And tying it back into the question asked before about undocumented folks here, and the question about how people are welcomed when they come to the community, I think there's a pretty broad range of experiences there, and I think people that are undocumented that are in Worthington are very fearful, and they're having a very difficult time. And especially right now with this national rhetoric, I think it's extra important that Worthington as a community come together to try to like show overt support of people and like find tangible ways to do that. And I think that's possible. You know, I don't think it's impossible, but I think we have to be really deliberate about it.
So yeah, the microphone's coming. So I appreciate your comments. Could you just tell a little bit more about your background? How long you've been in Worthington? Were you born here? What's your experience been? Just interested to get your perspective.
I'm actually from East Africa, first generation. I have been in Worthington going on 14 years now. 3 children. My daughter just graduated Worthington High School, attending college. And I have been working with the Nobles County Integration Collaborative since I've been in Worthington. Again, going back to how long I've been here and having these conversations constantly, but not seeing much changes is very frustrating for an immigrant community, for an immigrant person. And I would just love to have their voices on the table, the elderly, the newcomers, people with all the barriers, just listen to them. Usually when we have conversations like this, it's the usual leaders, but it doesn't reflect Worthington. And it's very frustrating, and that's constantly.
So let me ask you, maybe you can give me advice. When I travel around the district, I try to have forums that are open to everybody, and we do our best to try to reach people and invite the broadest array of folks to come. But I'll be honest with you, we don't get as much diversity as I would like. But I'm not sure how to do it other than saying it's open to everybody. I mean, how do we?
But again, it goes back to a
meetings.
lot of barriers, language barriers,
Yep.
and trust. And for me to invite the African community and say, hey, there's this forum going on, this discussion, they'd be like, oh, but what am I going to say? Does my voice even matter? So it's just connecting with the leaders and having it just be them and making it a very comfortable and just not very formal, but just a very comfortable meeting. And just even make coffee ceremonies, whatever their culture and tradition and food is, and just have them bring their children, have their children run around, be themselves, and they'll start talking. But the trust is where it's lacking.
Thank you. The gentleman to your right has a question.
Thank you. My name is McNay. I just wanted to comment on what you said about how do you get through the immigrant community. For a person of African descent, the key is elderlies of the community. In order to get immigrant communities to come out and be part of the conversation, flyers, word of the mouth doesn't do much. You need to talk to the elders of each community, and that is very important because Africa is often centered around this notion of living as a community. So you can say anything you want, but if the elder haven't spoken, nobody will respond. So the easy, fast, the best way to do it is to identify in each community who is the voice of reason, who is the voice of wisdom. Talk to them. They can rally more people than your radio, newspaper, anything else can do in a bit. So those elderlies, most of the time they don't speak English. They're not as educated, but they concentrate a lot of power within their communities. But you see, when we have this type of conversation, we often aim to the most educated, those who slightly resemble to our values, and we tend not to look to the elderlies because they look more like bush people. And we don't, there's a proverb in my language that say that the mouth of an elderly man may be stinking, but it has a lot of wisdom in it. And so we grew up around that notion of understanding. So you want to rally the community, you want to bring in the immigrants, target who is the elderly person, because when they have problems, before they go to court, they go to elderlies first. So if anything gets to court, it has failed to be solved within the community. Even the court system, if they can incorporate a way they can work with the communities of elders in each community, they can solve a lot of problems and prevent a lot of tragedies just by involving those very funny-looking people, but they have very much power within their own community. I think that's something you might explore, and you find it very interesting.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Related question, I guess, for the mayor, for anybody, is are the immigrant communities here, now that they've been here 10, 15 years, do they participate in the political process? Do they vote? Those who are citizens?
I think they vote. I think the one frustrating part is, we've tried to put immigrants on, or diversity on our various boards. But, lots of times the parents both work. If they own a business, they both support that business, and they don't take the time to come to those, like a planning commission. There's a meeting once a month, but it's a very important committee for our city. Well, we put one person on there, but she made one meeting out of 12. So it's been frustrating to bring them on board sometimes. And I can see their side of it. They're more interested in making sure they take care of their family and provide for their family. So we did have one run for council here the last go around, but I think they could contribute a lot.
Hi, my name is Erin Schutte-Wadzinski,
It's on.
and I might be Worthington's newest resident. My husband and I moved to town on Monday. I'm going to be an immigration attorney with the Immigration Law Center of Minnesota, serving low-income immigrants and providing free legal services to them. And it's great that I can come to town and join an event like this. I think I'm hoping that there are more sorts of these events throughout the year. I don't have much to say because I'm new. I did grow up in Worthington. I graduated from Worthington High School, but have been away for the past 10 years. And I've been impressed by how many statistics have been thrown out tonight about the growing populations and the percentage of JBS employees living in Worthington and so forth. But I think that I guess I wonder who is measuring these things, who's measuring new trends in Worthington, and who's counting who's here, and how do we really understand who is living in our community? And I guess I'd like to just get a better sense of what entities are kind of keeping a pulse on our Worthington community, so that we then have a better sense of, what communities we want to reach out to, what types of new cultures are coming to Worthington, and who might we be losing because this isn't a community for them.
This one goes to Neel. As Hispanic, I speak a lot with Hispanics. I speak with anybody who wants to speak to me, okay? But Hispanics seems to be more open when talking to me about how they feel living here in Worthington. And I am in business since 2010. And it was very different, the way that they were feeling back then and how they are feeling since maybe the last 2 years, I will say. Every Hispanic that I speak with, they are saying, I am keeping my money on my pocket because I don't feel safe in the United States anymore. And I think that is the feeling that every Hispanic is feeling all around the country, legal or illegal. But the Hispanic, the way I am seeing, is they are not really spending much money when they go to shopping. They are really keeping a lot of money with them because they don't feel that they should be buying because they don't feel safe, okay? Because a lot of things are going on right now in the country. So, and when people don't spend money, the economy goes like this, okay? Because we businesses need customers to spend money to keep businesses open as well, And doing the business I do involves helping them sometimes create their accounts for their phones, a lot of things. It takes some time to be with them, So you kind of meet them, you speak different things with them, and you kind of learn what they feel and what they want, And I think Hispanics are every Hispanic that I speak, they say, you know what, I'm keeping my money because I don't know what's going to happen. I might just send back to my country or where I came from. So that's the feeling they are feeling, okay? So I don't know if you can
Well,
tell.
I understand, and you're seeing these, you're seeing a lot of these concerns around the world. Different countries are expressing having the same anxieties about immigrants coming in. In Europe, they're having many of the same. It's different immigrants, but there are many communities in Europe that are also saying we want to keep ourselves closed up. And so all I can say is I know what you're saying is true. I know that's what different folks here are feeling. I wish I had answers. I don't have answers other than, I read a lot of history, a lot of American history, and there are cycles and there are ebbs and flows. Things go up and then things go down, and then things tend to smooth out over time. And so when I read a lot of American history, I see other periods when the country the pendulum has swung a certain way, and then it tends to swing back another way. And I know that's not very comforting, but that's all I can tell. That's all I can say. Thank you. I know we're running out of time. Mr. Mayor, why don't we turn it over to you?
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody in the community. Thank you for coming to Worthington and talking about this issue. There's with the national rhetoric that's coming out of Washington, I understand there's a lot of fear within the immigrant community, but it's not something that we can handle here. It's got to be done by the federal government. But what we can do is we can try to make Worthington the best community possible. And with everybody here, with their help, whether it's the faith community, whether it's the businesses, you conduct stay interviews instead of exit interviews. That's what we need, and that's what we're lucky we have here in Worthington. Is it perfect? It's not. But we need to constantly keep making it better. And we can, but we got to have faith in it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you all for being here.